My life, before it shattered, looked perfect. At least, from the outside. I was Irina, a successful manager at a large marketing agency in Chicago. My career was soaring. I loved my job, dynamic, creative, demanding constant sharpness. I had David, a caring, loving husband I'd been with for 15 years, ever since we met in college. We had two wonderful children, Sophie, our bright first grader, and little Leo, a 5-year-old whirlwind of energy and laughter. We lived in a spacious, cozy apartment in a new building, owned a car, and could afford trips a couple of times a year. Our weekends were filled with children's laughter, walks in the park, trips to the movies, or hosting friends. In photos, we looked like something out of a Happy Family magazine cover, smiling, attractive, successful. I believed in that picture. I was that picture. Stress was part of my job. Deadlines, demanding clients, responsibility for a team, constant competition. I handled it. I had always been organized, efficient, able to keep everything under control. And I found my way to unwind. At first, it was just a glass of wine after a particularly tough day. You open a bottle, pour a glass, sit on the couch, feel the pleasant warmth spread through your body, relieving the tension. One glass. Rarely two. It wasn't a problem. It was a ritual, a small reward for the day gone by. David might have a glass with me, or we'd open a bottle for dinner with friends. Alcohol was part of social life, part of relaxation. Nothing serious. My life was full. Work, kids, household chores, the gym, meeting friends. I was constantly rushing somewhere, doing something, talking to someone. Being busy, productive, that was my creed. I was proud of how much I managed. I was proud of myself. I didn't notice how small cracks began to appear in this perfect picture. How that glass of wine after work became a daily necessity. How the number of those glasses gradually increased. How sometimes I opened a bottle even if the day wasn't too tough, just because I felt tired, bored, or some vague anxiety. Alcohol became my quick way to turn off thoughts, stifle anxiety, relax here and now. My belief that I was in control was unwavering. I'm a successful woman, a loving mother, a caring wife. I don't have problems. I have a tool for relaxation, nothing more. I can stop anytime. That's what I thought. And that was my first, biggest mistake. Stress escalated. A project at work demanded more and more effort. Clients became more demanding. At home, there were also challenges. Sophie was adjusting to first grade. Leo had a difficult period in kindergarten. I felt torn between work, family, and attempts to keep some personal space. Fatigue accumulated. That glass of wine no longer brought the desired relaxation. To feel the same effect, I needed more. One glass turned into two, then three. The drink got stronger. Wine was replaced by something harder, something that worked faster. I started buying alcohol just in case, hiding bottles so David wouldn't see how much I was really consuming. Little rituals related to hiding appeared. Discarding empty bottles in outdoor trash cans, not at home. Airing out the room to get rid of the smell. Chewing mint gum before talking to David or the kids. These were small things, but they indicated that I was no longer in control of the situation. It was controlling me. I started justifying my drinking. Tough day, earned it, it's just to relieve stress. One glass won't hurt anyone. One glass turned into half a bottle, then a whole one. I drank in the evening when the kids were asleep or when David stayed late at work. It was my secret time, a time when I could rest from everything. Consequences weren't long in coming. At first, they were minor things. Poor sleep. In the morning, fatigue and headaches, which I attributed to overwork. Then, forgetfulness. I started forgetting small tasks at work, promises to the kids. My usual composure disappeared. Work started to suffer. I made mistakes in reports, was late for meetings. My team started noticing. My boss called me in, asked if everything was okay, if I needed help. I smiled and assured him everything was fine. Just a lot of stress lately. The relationship with David also changed. He noticed I had become more irritable, emotionally unstable. We started arguing over small things. He asked why I was so tired, why I was always in a bad mood. I brushed him off, blamed him, work, anything but myself, and my growing addiction. He started to withdraw, not understanding what was happening. His concern turned to confusion, then to irritation. I missed children's events at kindergarten or school because I didn't feel well or was too tired. In reality, I either couldn't get up in the morning due to a hangover or had already started drinking to take the edge off before going out. The children's eyes, Sophie's disappointment, Leo's confusion, hurt me, but didn't stop me. Alcohol was already stronger than my guilt. I was losing control. I no longer drank only in the evening. A glass could appear during the day when the kids were at school or kindergarten, and I was working from home, simulating work, in reality battling a hangover or planning the next drink. Life began to revolve around alcohol. When I could drink next, how to hide it, where to get money. I spent more and more money on alcohol, making up reasons for David about where the money was going. Lying became my constant companion. I lied to everyone, David, the kids, colleagues, myself. I lived in a world of illusions where everything was supposedly fine, but an abyss was growing beneath the surface. My perfect picture cracked, and I was rapidly sliding down a slippery slope, unable or no longer wanting to stop. I was Irina, a woman losing herself in the grip of addiction. The consequences of my drinking became more obvious. My appearance changed. My face became puffy. There were constant bags under my eyes. My skin took on an unhealthy pallor. I tried to hide it with makeup, but it no longer helped. My hands trembled in the morning until I had my medicine, another dose of alcohol that calmed my nerves and the physical dependence that had already formed. Things at work went from bad to worse. I made a serious mistake in a major advertising campaign that cost the company significant money and damaged relationships with a big client. The director called me in. His face was serious, disappointed. He said they valued my previous contributions, but my recent results were unsatisfactory. He gave me one last chance, putting me on probation. Shame and fear mixed with the desire to drink it all away, to forget. The relationship with David reached a breaking point. He no longer just asked, he demanded explanations. He saw the bottles I couldn't hide well enough. He smelled the alcohol I couldn't completely cover up. There were loud arguments. He yelled that I was destroying our family, that I had changed, that I wasn't the woman he loved. I yelled back, blamed him for everything, denied my problem, said he didn't understand how hard it was for me. The kids saw and felt everything. They became more withdrawn. They stopped laughing as genuinely. Sophie started doing poorly in school. Leo became more capricious and restless. They were afraid of my bad mood, my irritability. Their little hearts suffered, and it tore me apart inside. But even that couldn't make me stop. The addiction was stronger than my maternal instinct, stronger than love. That was the most terrifying realization. I was turning into a monster for the people I loved most. My social circle shrank to a minimum. Old friends stopped calling, seeing what was happening to me. My new acquaintances were only people I could drink with. My life became lonely and focused on only one thing, getting the next dose of alcohol. Rock bottom was close. I felt it. Physical and emotional exhaustion reached its limit. I woke up with one thought, where to get a drink to survive the day. My hands trembled so much I couldn't hold a cup. Nausea was constant. I was barely functioning. David delivered an ultimatum. Either I get help, or he takes the kids and leaves. His face was pale, his eyes filled with pain but determination. I saw he wasn't bluffing. The threat of losing my children, that was something that pierced through the wall of my denial. For a moment, I saw myself from the outside, pathetic, weak, having lost everything, and that image terrified me to death. I cried, begged, promised I would handle it myself. But David no longer believed me. He said he had already found a rehabilitation center, that he would help me, be there for me, but I had to take the step. It was the hardest decision of my life, to admit I was an addict, to admit I couldn't cope, to ask for help. Shame burned me from within, but the fear of losing my family was stronger. I agreed, with a trembling voice, with tears in my eyes. I agreed to go to a rehabilitation center. It was my chance, maybe my last one. The drive to the rehabilitation center was quiet. David drove me. I looked out the window at the trees flashing by and felt completely empty. Fear mixed with shame, with guilt. I was leaving my family, my children, my home, to shut myself away within the walls of a clinic, like a real alcoholic. The word cut through me. The center wasn't what I had imagined, not a hospital with white walls and the smell of medicine. It was a large, old house outside the city, surrounded by a small garden. Inside, it was clean, simple, but not depressing. I was met by friendly staff, not judgmental, but calm and professional. The intake process, a conversation with a doctor specializing in addiction. I told him about myself, about my drinking, trying to downplay the extent of the problem, but realizing it was pointless. They had seen hundreds like me. They knew. The first few days were hell. Detox. Physical pain, nausea, trembling, cold sweats, insomnia, nightmares. My body rebelled, demanding alcohol. It was unbearable. I thought I would die. But the medical staff was there, helping me manage the symptoms, supporting me. They said this was the hardest stage and I had to get through it. There were other people there, with the same problems, with the same stories of pain and loss. Drug addicts, alcoholics. People of different ages, different social statuses. At first, I kept my distance, feeling better than them, because I just drank, I didn't. But eventually, I realized that addiction doesn't discriminate. It breaks everyone equally. Life at the center was strictly structured. Wake up, group therapy, individual consultations with a therapist, exercise, art therapy, lectures on addiction. The whole day was scheduled, leaving no time for loneliness and dark thoughts. Group therapy was the hardest. Sitting in a circle of strangers and talking about my pain, about my mistakes, about my shame. I had never been an open person, especially about my weaknesses. The first few times, I was silent, listening to others. Listening to stories that were so similar to mine. And I saw tears, pain, but also hope in the eyes of others. Gradually, I started to open up. It was hard to talk, but it brought relief. Like a heavy burden was being lifted from me. Individual consultations with a therapist helped me look inside myself. We talked about the reasons for my addiction: stress, perfectionism, fear of not meeting expectations, my own and others', inability to cope with difficulties without crutches. I began to understand that alcohol was just a symptom, a way to escape from real problems, not a solution. I learned a lot about addiction as a disease, chronic, relapsing, requiring continuous self-work. About triggers, about relapses, about the importance of support. It wasn't just weakness of character, as I had thought before. It was a real illness that had changed the biochemistry of my brain. This realization was both terrifying and provided a certain relief. I wasn't bad, I was sick. And an illness could be treated. There were moments of despair. Days when I wanted to give up, run away, drink myself into oblivion. When it seemed like it was all pointless, that I would never be normal. But the support of the staff and other patients helped me get through those moments. We supported each other, shared experiences, gave hope. I missed the kids and David the most. They came to see me on designated visiting days. These meetings were emotionally difficult. The kids were cautious, as if afraid of doing something wrong. David held himself together, tried to be strong, but I saw the pain in his eyes. I promised them I would be home soon, that everything would be okay. I had to prove it not only to them but also to myself. Their love was my main motivation. Weeks in the rehabilitation center blurred into one long, intense period. I went through physical cleansing, started to address my psychological issues, learned new ways to cope with stress and negative emotions through talking, exercise, creativity. I began to reprogram my thinking, change my usual reactions to problems. It was hard work, daily, exhausting. There were days when I felt progress, small victories over myself. And there were days when it seemed like I was standing still or even moving backward. But I didn't stop. The goal, to return to a normal life, to my family, was too important. One of the key moments of rehabilitation was writing my addiction story. It was a detailed description of my path into addiction, from the first glass to the last day of active drinking. Writing it down, looking at my journey from the outside, without embellishments or excuses, was painful, but necessary. It helped me realize the scale of the problem, accept my responsibility. We also worked on identifying triggers, situations, emotions, places, people that could provoke the desire to drink. And we developed strategies on how to deal with those triggers. This was important because I understood that the real world outside the center's walls would be full of such triggers. I started building relationships with other patients. We shared our fears, hopes, supported each other. A kind of community formed, united by common misfortune and a common desire to recover. It was invaluable, knowing that you weren't alone in your struggle. The therapist also worked with me on rebuilding my self-esteem, which had been destroyed by years of drinking and lying. I learned to accept myself, with my mistakes, weaknesses, illness. I learned to believe in myself again. After several weeks of inpatient treatment, they allowed me to switch to an outpatient program. I could live at home, but visit the center daily for therapies and consultations. It was a transitional phase, the first step towards returning to the real world. Coming home was strange. The apartment looked the same, but everything had changed. David and the kids met me cautiously, with a mixture of joy and apprehension. There was awkwardness in communication. It was as if we were learning to live together again. The kids looked at me as if they were expecting something. I tried to be normal, smiling, caring mom I was before the illness. But I understood that it would take time and effort to rebuild trust. The hardest part was facing triggers at home and in the city. Stress at work. I returned part-time, trying to ease back in, meeting old acquaintances, familiar places where I used to drink. The desire to drink away the problem, fatigue, emotions, it appeared unexpectedly, sometimes with enormous force. In such moments, I immediately called my therapist or someone from my support group. Talking helped distract me, reminded me of the consequences of the path I had already taken. I started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. At first, it was scary and uncomfortable, but over time, it became an important part of my support system. Listening to others' stories, sharing my own experience, knowing that you are understood, it gave me strength. Recovery is not a magic cure. It's daily work, a daily choice. A choice for sobriety, a choice for life. I had to be constantly vigilant, control my emotions, avoid dangerous situations. Gradually, the relationships with my family began to improve. David saw that I was truly trying. He was patient, supported me, went to family counseling with me. The kids began to trust me again. Their smiles became more genuine. We started spending time together again, playing, walking, just being together. These moments were my greatest reward. A year passed, then two. My life gradually returned to normal, but it was a new normal. I no longer worked at the marketing agency. After returning, I realized that the high level of stress there was too great a risk for me. It was a difficult decision, but I chose sobriety over a career that could destroy me again. I returned to the library, full-time. The salary was significantly lower than before, but the job was calm, brought satisfaction, and allowed me to focus on the main thing, my recovery and my family. My colleagues accepted me with understanding, Many knew about my situation. I actively worked on my recovery. I regularly attended AA meetings, continued individual therapy. I learned to recognize the first signs of stress or emotional overload and use healthy mechanisms to cope with them: meditation, yoga, walks in nature, talking to loved ones. My relationship with David became deeper than ever. We went through hell together, and that either breaks you or strengthens you. It strengthened us. David became even more caring, and I became more grateful for his love, patience, and support. We learned to talk about our feelings openly, not to be afraid of vulnerability. My kids got their smiles back. They saw that Mom had changed, that I was there again, that I was the person they remembered and loved so much. I tried to make up for lost time, to be present in their lives, to listen to them, to support them. Our relationship became very close. I found new hobbies that weren't related to alcohol. I resumed exercising. I started painting. It helped me express emotions. I discovered a world that had been hidden from me when my life revolved only around addiction. Living in sobriety is a daily choice. There was no moment when I could say, "That's it, I'm cured." Addiction is a chronic illness. It's always there somewhere, like a shadow. But I learned to live with that shadow without letting it consume me again. I knew my weaknesses, my triggers. I knew I couldn't allow myself even one drink. Sometimes there were tough days. Days when old problems seemed unbearable and the desire to escape felt strong. But I had the tools to cope with it. And I had people who believed in me. I started sharing my story with others who were struggling with addiction. I became a volunteer in a support group. Helping others, seeing them take the first steps towards recovery, it gave immense meaning to my own journey. It felt like paying back for the chance I had been given. 5 years have passed since the day I walked through the doors of the rehabilitation center. 5 years of sobriety. It has been the hardest, but also the most valuable period of my life. I look back at the Irina who was drowning in alcohol and lies, and I see an almost foreign person. But I remember her. And I am grateful to her for finding a tiny spark of strength to take the first step towards salvation. What did I lose? I lost a part of my career, part of my income, a lot of time, the trust of loved ones, which took a long time to rebuild. I lost the illusion of control and the perfect picture. What did I gain? I gained myself. I gained genuine, deep relationships with my husband and children, based on honesty and acceptance. I gained understanding of myself, my weaknesses, and my incredible strength. I gained appreciation for every sober day. I gained the opportunity to live a full life, to feel emotions, both joy and pain, without needing to numb them. I gained the opportunity to help others. Addiction is a terrible illness. It destroys lives, shatters families, takes away hope. It doesn't choose whom to affect. It can knock on anyone's door. But recovery is possible. It's not easy. It requires courage, honesty, perseverance, and support. You cannot cope alone. You need the help of specialists, the support of loved ones, a community of people who understand. The most important lesson I learned is not to be afraid to ask for help. It's not weakness, it's strength. It's the first step towards recovery. And the second lesson is that life in sobriety is not boring or devoid of joy. It is real, with its challenges, problems, but also with moments of genuine happiness that are not overshadowed by the fog of alcohol. I feel everything more keenly, more vividly. And it is beautiful. My future? I don't know what it will bring. Life is unpredictable. There may be difficulties, there may be temptations. But I know I have the tools to deal with it. I know I have support. I know I am strong. My story is not just about falling and recovering. It's about accepting yourself, about forgiveness of myself and others, about the value of each day. It's about the fact that even from the deepest abyss, there is a way out if you have the courage to reach out for help and take the first step on the path to the light. I am Irina, and I found myself in the fragments of my former life. I found myself stronger, wiser, real. And I am grateful for the second chance. Every day is a gift. And I live it sober, consciously, with love in my heart.